Step 1, power supply. All right, guys. When you build the power supply, you're going to temporarily put together the chassis. So you need to go ahead and get all the chassis pieces out. Make sure everything's unboxed and clear. You're going to put it together temporarily in the testing phase. So I'm going to take it out, put it aside for right now, but keep that in mind. Secondly, and actually most importantly, make sure that you have the build guide in front of you as well. As you can see, I have this ancient iPad with the build guide in front of me, which I'll be following step by step and pointing stuff out as we go along. For the most part, I'll be doing this as a time lapse, so you'll see me assemble things and I'll stop and then talk a little bit about what's going on when I run into some of the, I guess, confusing spots for me initially and when I was doing my first one. So anyway, we'll keep on moving on. You need to make sure for this first part, we're going to get the PCBs out that we need. All right, as well as the other parts. But initially, we're going to be working with the voltage selector switch PCB, which is this small one right here. The main PCB, obviously this big guy, and the meter PCB. The meter PCB, or excuse me, yes, the meter PCB. The meter PCB has the off switch on it. Okay, so this is going to be, this switch set is directly responsible for voltage coming in and out of the unit. So we're going to be messing with that as well. So these three guys initially are going to be what's on the plate. So go ahead and pull up your guides. Make sure you got it in front of you. Get your soldering irons hot. If you want to do a small drum roll, feel free. But let's get some pieces out here. So, power supply box 1, power supply box 2. Let's start there. So, the first thing we're going to be messing with is this switch side guy. So this is where the time lapse will begin. I recommend rocking one of these fantastic pieces of headgear to give you magnification close up on stuff, as well as a little bonus light if you need it. I've got this guy as well. It's going to push out a lot of light, being able to see what you're doing. Also, when I'm soldering, I'm typically soldering with the piece here, I'm soldering down towards me because I have a lot of articulation this way. So you'll see me sometimes turn the board with the part and solder that way and keep moving it so that I'm constantly, like I'm gonna solder farthest away and up in this corner first and work my way back towards my hand so that I'm ending up in a smaller area back here. So one thing you see me do, that's not a requirement, that's just something that I've kind of picked up on to help me over the years putting stuff together. There is one set of parts that we don't have in this box, and that's going to be 2 resistors that we place on the meter PCB. Those have to be gotten from the resistor box. You'll see me do that. I'll stop and say, oh, here's where you need the resistors when we start working on this section right here. But anyway, on to this part. We'll start here. You'll see me assemble this stuff together, and then we'll move on to this guy, and then finally the pieces to go here, and we'll put it together. All right, see you on the other side. All right, this is a moment that we're gonna break in here. So we've got the meter PCB put together. This is crucial that it's absolutely flush. So if you saw when I did one corner, then I checked it to the other corner, and then worked my way towards the middle. all these solder points here. And it's really important to follow the directions and go through the order that they suggest, because it's, as you notice right here, these resistors are almost impossible to get to if this stuff's in the way. So the order in which they lay it out is absolutely the way you should do it. This, and making sure our switch and our connections here are set. You notice I've gone ahead and switched mine to 115 volts because I'm in the United States. So if you're overseas, or not in the United States, I guess, a lot of places, we are 115, we're the weirdos. Switch it to 230, do what's applicable. Just make sure you put it in the correct one for your country. All right, so now we're gonna move on to the big board. In the instructions, they're referencing a blue board constantly, and our boards for the Rev F are red. In this section, they talk about a capacitor going into spot C23, and it's a blue capacitor, right? This blue capacitor, it's a large axial electrolytic capacitor, and they're polarized, so we got to be careful with orientation too. So we're going to take them out. So this one is the one specifically, and the other ones just all fill the appropriate slots. You get a ton of these little baggies, by the way, after you build the kit, so organize screws, stuff like that in your workshop. Very useful. My wife likes them for craft stuff. All right, so on the silk screen here, pretty sure you guys can see that. Let's see, there we go. You'll see C23, 24, 25, and 26. On the blue board, however, this one on ours is C25. On the blue board, it's C23. Okay, so they're going to reference C23 over and over and over again. That is not the case in our board on the Rev F. It's going to go in C25. Okay. Also, we'll be installing a Zener diode. It's important to follow the instructions on how to lay in the washers and stuff like that to put it together. Anyway, that's the big news. That's the part that differs from, one of the big parts that differs from the build. This is going to be in the same physical position on the silk screen as it is in the guide, but it is a different number numerically on our board, C25, standing for capacitor 25. And remember, kids, these are polarized and they're heavy voltage ones. If you put them in backwards, they will explode. Okay, so this is the only dangerous, quote unquote, part. We want to make sure that we get this right. And that's the whole point of the power supply build, is we're going to do all this stuff, and we're going to plug it in, and we're going to test it and make sure that we're not going to set our house on fire. All right, 3, 2, 1, let's get back to it. All right, so it's all put together. We've attached all the JST connectors except for this one little guy that we're leaving here. Everything else is hooked up. The switches got activity and stuff like that. This is going to be actually for meter select stuff later, so we don't have to worry about that. But everything's in, looks good. Checking our polarity, because if anything's wrong, these guys are going to be the dangerous pieces in the build. These large capacitors right here hold a lot of juice, so when they fail a little more spectacularly. That being said, all right, now we're going to go to the testing phase. First things first, double check your switch. Make sure you're in the right region. So Europe, 230, US, 115. Know your region. So that's the first thing. Second thing, turn it off. Remember, this has an off button. It's on by default, so make sure it's off. And we're going to check that again before we get going. And now, most importantly, you need to get out your multimeter because we're going to have to check some stuff to make sure that we're functioning properly. So, I got my little fluky, keeping life cool, and we'll get into that in a minute. All right. So first things first, we're going to ground our meter to the chassis. So I can kind of do that by kind of hanging this guy in there like that. Also, it's off now. So now let's get our IEC cable. I've got one over here. I'm going to sneak in back here and give this thing juice. I'm still leery at this point of this thing because I just put it together. So I'm going to take everything out. I'm going to undo what I just did there and put juice to it. It didn't immediately explode, so that means my switch is working properly. And it means that my hot and my ground and all that stuff is appropriate. So anyway, back to our testing. So we're going to pop our common probe into one of our mounting holes to establish our ground. And I'm going through the directions, just kind of walking through this with you guys. All right, so first things first, we got to make sure that the ground neutral dump is working properly. So we're going to go to resistance in ohms, and we're going to measure from the black to the green, where the green grounding plug is right here. We're going to measure our load here. Sometimes this meter is a little weird. Okay, my meter is not jamming. There we go. All right, at first it was alarmingly high, but now it's not. We're at 0.6 ohms. That's kind of high, to be honest with you. There we go, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.5, 0.4. All right, we're settling a little bit. It's not over 1. Okay, so that's a good thing. So that part's not foobar. So let's go to DC voltage. Right here on our meter. And we're going to turn the unit on. Now this is the part where if something blows up, these guys do, and they blow up with melting capacitor juice. So I'm going to turn it on, but I'm going to back up. So hopefully I'm going to do this too to shield myself. All right. No smoke, no fire. All right. These aren't insanely hot or anything. That's good. Okay. DC voltage. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to check from common to the top of our Zener diode that's mounted up here. And we're going to be looking for 30-ish volts. And I'm showing 31.07. Plus or minus 5% is our tolerance, so that's well within tolerance. All right, same thing, grounding, and then we're going to measure on the anode, the negative 10 volt side. And we should read negative 10 volts if this is working properly. Shut the front door. Negative 9.65, plus or minus 5%. All right. Guess what? It works. All right, guys, that's part one, building the power supply. So the next thing we're going to be doing in part two, taking this back apart again as far as the chassis and stuff. We're going to be focusing on this board, and it's going to be a two-part series on this board where we're going to be populating a lot of the parts on here for the first part, and just focused on that, not worrying about the rest of the build. And then we'll come back, finish the big pieces on here, what I call the odd pieces, put this sucker together. All right, so thanks for sticking in with this whole thing. I know it's a long video, but hopefully it was helpful to you guys at home if you're going to be putting this together. Again, this is a Hairball Rev F 1176 FET rack compressor. I'm stoked because this is the sister to the one that's already been built, so this will be the end of my stereo pair, and I can mix to my heart's content. All right, guys, thanks for hanging.